Because I definitely do. Oh, we should sound like those influencers, and we're like, "Hey guys, just waiting for a few more people to hop on." I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Nobody's on. Oh, somebody's.
Yay!
Hi, friends. Oh, this is.
Whoa, we got
so
people
funny.
from both. Look at that. Oh my gosh, this is
Wow. Hey, everyone.
cool. Oh, cool.
So, if you guys haven't noticed, we literally have our two phones, like right next to each other. So we're coming at you from both accounts.
Yeah.
JW and Simply Snooters.
Oh.
And the dogs are chiming in already.
Already.
This is great.
Well, hopefully Austin will be able to handle Tuxie over there. Oh, hey, Blue Billy. I love Blue
I know,
Billy.
this is awesome. Oh, fellow Chihuahua lover. I know I'm hanging with big dogs this week, but got the little dogs at home. So you're the live expert.
Oh, okay.
I'll follow your lead of when to start.
Well, we're going to save this anyway, so we don't want to take too long to start.
Yeah.
So we basically just wanted to do this little live because Juliana is here, and I'm super pumped about it. And so obviously those of you who know me on my page know a lot of the behavior modification that we've been doing. You were out of my frame.
So hard of both of them.
I know.
Okay, and for people on my page, you're Amanda. You're Simply Mander, Simply Snooters. And, okay, I'll give a brief background from my perspective. You have two adult female pit-type dogs who got into 2, almost 3 fights back in the fall. And we've been working together virtually since November, since like before Thanksgiving.
Yep. It was actually literally like the day after the fight that I was talking about it, and then that's how you reached out to me actually, because I was like, I don't know what type of like certifications I need to be looking for, because I knew this was a serious case, and I didn't want just like, you know, random people trying to help me. I wanted like actual legit trainer. But it's been really cool because we've actually like become friends over this, which is like super awesome, and it's been such a fun journey, even though the circumstances sucked, but I definitely wanted to talk more about that because I think sometimes we look at these things with behavior modification as like only a negative, but in all honesty, there can be a lot of good that comes from it. So Juliana really wanted to talk about kind of like the progression of if you do have something that does require behavior modification, what that looks like, kind of just like the steps that we took to get us from there to here, because right now we are approaching actually the 7-month mark on June. They got into a fight on November 3rd. That was their first fight. So it's almost been 7 months of this. So it's just been a long journey, but obviously Juliana's familiar with this, and you know, she just wanted to share, or we wanted to share from both of our perspectives, the process of all of this. So
yeah, and so it was also a little bit different and interesting because we did work on it together virtually, which is like you would think is really challenging, which it does come with its challenges. That's why I'm here in person, because it is really nice to deal with this stuff in person eventually, but there's also a lot of benefits because there's a lot we do that I don't necessarily need to be here for. And so like the first step with any BMOD, which is short for behavior modification, and especially when 2 dogs in a home get into a fight, is separation and what we call management. So before you start any type of changing behavior, you have to do hard stop. How do we get everybody safe and comfortable as quickly as possible? And so if you have 2 dogs who got into a fight, that means giving everybody... Whoa!
I knew it. What is that? The motorcycle.
Was it really?
Yeah,
What's wrong?
Oh, it's a motorcycle.
And so I think everybody who's watching understands stuff like that. And so we had to make sure that there's a lot of management and boundaries, like physical boundaries, so like gates, doors between the dogs, so that in between our very careful and structured behavior modification training sessions, they could all exhale and take a big like decompression time, basically, so they're not feeling constantly scared or on top of each other, which is so important because stress, as you've known from the human perspective as well, stress takes a huge toll on behavior and progress made. So the first thing is to separate so that we get stress levels and safety under control.
And I think from the human perspective too, because this is something that I personally really struggled with during this process, because the incident, both times I was stuck in the middle of it and I got bit both times, which was obviously my own fault because I did what you're technically not supposed to do by shoving your hands and body. Like, I was literally physically rolling on the ground with them during the second fight because I was by myself. And the second one was more traumatic for me in the sense that I was out on a walk, nobody was coming to help me, and I felt like I didn't know what else to do. And that entire process, I think, gave me a lot of PTSD where I was not willing to move forward without the barriers. And you shouldn't, like Juliana was saying, like, you have to have the structures, you have to have the safety for both of them, but the boundaries really that I struggled with were the mental ones. Like, I did not think that we were ever going to get to where we are right now, but like, we were talking about it today, like, anytime I see any dog anywhere, the first thing that like replays in my mind is that fight, that moment. It is so emotionally taxing, but it's just like, now I can't unsee it or unthink of like what could potentially cause that situation to happen again. And they pick up on that. Like, they pick up on my stress and anxiety throughout the situation, which is obviously tough because I can't just like shut that off, but it does play a role. Like, it caused a lot more stress because I know they were picking up on me being stressed.
Which kind of brings to the next step, and that's what's really important to understand, is it really is like a step process where you're building on each next step. And like Amanda, you would always say at the beginning, you're like, how will I ever know when I'm okay moving to the next step? And I really tried to stress, like, you'll actually notice that it happens pretty organically. Like, you will have such a strong reinforcement history yourself of things going okay, because we're going to create an environment where there's no choice but for these dogs to make good choices around each other.
Right.
And so so much of this process is rebuilding your trust with, I mean, Eliza's really the one who started it, but like with both dogs and trusting them being able to be together. But I think with any BMOD, whether it's like your dog is reactive to other dogs or to strangers or children or like whatever, part of that training involves just relationship building between you and your dog and rebuilding that trust.
Yeah.
And that can really start with, it sounds so simple, but the basics are so important. So like starting with, so the next step after management is really building foundation cues for you and your dog, so that down the road, and we're seeing it, like we see it all day when the dogs are together, like these basic cues that you teach your dog and you teach them with positive reinforcement so the dog really enjoys doing the behaviors that you can then use to have control over them without having to physically intervene, because one, physically intervening in a fight is not safe, and two, physically intervening and adding tension to an equation. So like having to pull a dog by their collar or by the harness or physically move them can actually surprisingly spark a fight. And so it's really important to have a lot of options, a lot of behaviors on cue so that you can diffuse situations without physically intervening.
And that would be an example such as like place or climb or
touch, their name, the positive interrupter we've worked on. Bop, bop. And so like we'll talk about what happened today.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Morning. So a part of my reason for being here is that we can basically have another set of trained eyes on the dogs together, because it's really hard when, one, it's just safer to have more than one person, but also more than one person that really truly understands body language and can see like, okay, this is an okay interaction, this isn't an okay interaction. And so part of what I'm doing here is being that extra set of eyes and hands. And so today we were going to basically let a situation play out that I think we're ready for, which is the dogs having just a little bit more freedom. We've done a ton of structured freedom. Everybody's made really good choices. And so we let something play out today because it's basically the next step. And there was like a toy involved and some excitement and like kind of a small space. And it was a situation that made, like Amanda was saying, like her PTSD kind of go off, because it was a situation that's caused one of the dogs to react in the past. But what was really different about this time is, one, nobody got super spooky. There wasn't any like aggression or anything like that. And two, Amanda literally was able to say, oh, let's go, and like move the dogs away from each other effortlessly, no question. And everybody just walked away from each other. They were loose, relaxed, wiggly body language, and it was a non-issue. And so that is where the difference is. Like, if you don't have those tools and your dog doesn't have that responsiveness to you and your voice and your cues to them, you don't have that option to diffuse things in a way that will decrease stress and make things not blow up.
Right. And I think the other thing, I just saw a comment scroll past that I want to address really quick. Someone said that their dog takes treats in the house but not outside. And there are certain stress scenarios that will cause your dog, even if it's not necessarily negative in your eyes, like if you're just saying that he or she is on a walk and refuses to take treats, I think that's something that, and obviously I'm sure everyone knows this, I'm not a dog trainer, I'm just telling you this based on our situation that has happened. If they don't have that consistent history of positive reinforcement with you on the walk, like checking in with you and getting a reward, or the fact that the environment is too stimulating or too enticing or more enticing, right? I guess that's what you would consider it to be. Then like you have to take time building that foundation. In this scenario, like we were just saying, when we do those positive interrupters, they're conditioned to that essentially, to know that like that means like we're going somewhere else and I'm getting some type of reward. So it all kind of comes down to what they know historically with whatever they've been reinforced for in the past. So like if your dog has never gotten treats on a walk, like why would they think that they're getting them now all of a sudden? So you have to like work on that foundation, which is literally what we've been doing since they got into a fight, but obviously on the track of behavior modification for mostly Eliza in this scenario, because with that instance that Julie was just talking about, it's Eliza that doesn't give proper social cues. And we'll talk really quickly just before we move on to the next section. When Julie was training Tux and Bailey today, I was on a Zoom call, and she was trying to teach Tucker to touch Bailey. And Bailey is actually really good at letting whoever know that she's uncomfortable without being what would we
over the top?
Yeah, like
inappropriate.
Just inappropriate.
Like,
yeah. Like she is able to communicate to Tucker, like, "Hey, I don't like you stepping on me," by just a really like small little snarl or a growl. And Tucker, bless his heart, obviously he don't care, but he's just like, okay, and then like they move along. Like there's no, for me, there has never been a fear of like, oh my god, this is going to cause a fight. Eliza, however, struggles with that tipping over because she gets triggered by that type of communication. The third fight that almost happened was because Bailey did a "I'm uncomfy" growl at her, and that immediately caused Eliza to react and go to attack her. So Eliza doesn't have the proper, what would you say, communication?
Yeah.
Understanding of dog language. So for me, it makes that situation much more difficult because I don't know where the line is where she starts to feel uncomfy. Okay, she's uncomfy, and then all of a sudden she's over and she's in attack. She's
got a low threshold.
Yeah, there is no like, hey, I'm uncomfy. It's like, I'm uncomfy, I'm attacking. Right. So that's really the biggest challenge that we've had in this step-by-step process, because in order to let these situations play out, we have to be careful to not cross that threshold, because that's going to send us back to square one, essentially.
And you bring up a lot of really good points about threshold. And what a threshold means is basically like how much your dog can handle before they start having an overreaction. So barking, lunging, growling, or unfortunately in Eliza's case, attacking. And threshold can be related to how your dog is feeling. And so that's kind of the third step in the process after you build foundation behaviors, is addressing the underlying feeling that has caused the behavior. And this is a huge piece to any behavior modification program where you're seeing any type of aggression or reactivity, is you have to deal with the underlying reason for the behavior. And so in this case, it's hard to know kind of like the reasons where the initial, all this fights truly happened. But what had happened ultimately was that the dogs did not like each other anymore, and that was causing a lot of conflict. And so we had to deal with the underlying emotion and basically rebuild their relationship in a way that made them like each other again.
And I think it's also important to note that they lived together seamlessly for a year prior to the fight. And when they did get into their initial fight, Eliza had been on prednisone, which is a steroid essentially for treating her heartworm. And it can cause frustration, aggression, and just her not feeling well. That day of the fight, she had actually gotten sick. She was not eating, and she wasn't feeling well. So I would probably say, although it's impossible to say for sure, it is a safe bet that the initial fight was caused by a feeling of her not feeling well. And whatever happened through that initial doorway that caused it, I'll never know. But it's important that like we know that like what her baseline was essentially for that situation, because now, you know, like we learn to not go through doorways together. And like, that's kind of what I was saying in the beginning. Like, although it was horrible, I think also taught me a lot about their dynamic and relationship and like what we needed to work on moving forward.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't know this stuff until, unfortunately, you're forced to learn it. You're
100%.
forced to learn body language. You're forced to learn effective training. You're forced to learn about dog behavior. It's crazy. Somebody had a question. Do you think dogs can just have an off day where their threshold is reached much quicker? Absolutely. Just like humans can. Like, you were posting the other day, you were like, today's just the worst and I'm going to fly off the handle at like the first thing that happens, right? So like,
yeah,
some days you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed. The same thing with the dogs. Or they have what's called trigger stacking, where they experience a lot of stressful things over and over again. And that's, trigger stacking is huge. And like some of this stuff we're jumping around, but it's because behavior modification has so many pieces to it.
Yeah.
And a huge piece to it is educating yourself as a pet parent about trigger stacking, body language, stress signals, like stress in dogs, decompression, enrichment. Like, there's so many pieces. It's very daunting.
So much. No, but it's good, because I think a lot of people, well, I do know a lot of people on my snooters page, they obviously have dogs or they love dogs, but they were kind of like me in the sense where like we're really passionate dog parents, but we don't know this kind of information because we why would we know? We never had a dog fight before. And I think the other part to that, some people have said to me after this incident where they saw the girls get into their fight, they were like, oh, my dog just attacked my other dog out of nowhere. And I think that's honestly like 99.9% of the time that's actually not true. It's just that they don't know what was happening prior that caused that situation. So I think it's a great learning opportunity, even if you're just watching this and you've never experienced a dog fight, to maybe like branch out and try to do some more research on doggy behavior, doggy body language. When I say behavior generally, I just mean like, you know, like you were saying, trigger stacking and things that you should look out for as a pet parent, so that unfortunately you don't end up in the same situation that I did.
Right.
Because I was just blessed. We were talking about this earlier with Tuxie. Like, he was truly a unicorn dog for 10 years of my life, and I've never had an issue with him. And he has the, you know, basic training, but nothing that required behavior modification. Whereas this situation forced me to then learn about it. And I was so uneducated, so uneducated by trainers and by the internet.
Yes, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so you're absolutely right that like educating yourself with like scientific and legitimate sources is really important. Body language especially, I think, is something that people just don't understand.
Yeah.
And it can be such a huge piece to the puzzle. So somebody had a question: if your dogs get into a fight, what is the proper way to stop it? And Amanda can tell you the improper way to stop it. So just really quickly, because I know like not a lot of people necessarily go through dog fights or even have more than one dog, but it's important to know if your dog ever gets attacked. Obviously, we really try hard to not put our hands in the middle of it.
Oh, so like don't dive bomb onto them and try to like barrel roll and do that, because that's what I did.
Well, I mean, look, your parent instincts are going to kick in no matter what.
Right.
But it's really important that if there's a lot of thrashing, that you're not putting your hands in the middle. If you're home, you can try to throw water on the dogs. And this is if there's an active fight, you can throw a blanket on them. If it's out and you've got a dog that's latched on, like if you're out on a walk and the dog attacks your dog, what's really important is that you don't pull them apart, because pulling while a dog is latched can cause them tearing and stuff like that. There's a couple different methods out there. Some people say like pick up the hind end. A lot of times, unfortunately, you might have to, if there is a dog that's truly latched, like choke them out basically, because anything to get that dog off.
That was a collar twist.
Yes. What did it look like?
I'm not sure.
sorry. Yes, that was like holding. Yes, thank you. Holding the.
Initially I thought you were going to say twist the tail, and I was like, that's not right. And then I was like, oh, we should probably explain that.
Yes. Thank you. So, I mean, it's really, and for all this stuff, like mega disclaimer, guys, like we're sharing a little bit of information, but you 1000% should be working with your own certified professional. This is really kind of just like anecdotal.
Yeah, like general
sharing, right? So yes, that's about all I have to say about breaking up dog fights. Although we were talking about when for a home with a multi-dog household where you're worried about fights, citronella spray and air horns can also be helpful in quickly breaking up fights.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Nothing. I was going to say I'm done with my dog fight piece.
Well, that's a good information. I wanted to, that's what Emily said. I think the other thing I wanted to mention, because I have talked very openly about not bringing my dogs to dog parks, and I'm not saying, again, this is, like Julie said, this is anecdotal. This is my personal opinion on it due to other people's lack of understanding dog body language for that exact reason. It has been taught to many dog parents that dog parks are the only way to socialize your dog, and I can say with confidence that that's actually not true. It is not the only way, and it is not the best way for all dogs. Some dogs, it is unfair to say that all dogs need to be social with all dogs, and for some reason that I don't really know why, maybe you have better insight than I do, but like it's a very common thing that people think that like, oh, I need to, you know, bring my dog to the dog park to let it play with other dogs, but it can actually, depending on your dog, can do the exact opposite. And so the reason why I don't do that, number one, obviously the fight scenario. Number two, Tuxie did actually have a bad experience. It wasn't like a full dog park where people were like just dogs everywhere. To me, that's, and this is coming from an anxious person, that is just way too much risk with not enough reward. You cannot control everybody else's dog. You don't know what those dogs' thresholds are. Most people don't even know what their own dog's thresholds are, or triggers, or whatever. There's way too much stimulus. For me, it's a recipe for disaster. And even when Tuxie was socializing with one other pit bull, this happened, I think like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe? No, not that long. Either way, he was socializing with a pit bull, and Tuxie likes to play with his front feet like this, and he jumped up on his back legs, and that dog said, and turned around and attacked him, pinned him down to the ground. Luckily, it was not severe, but it was severe enough for me to immediately be like, absolutely not, never again. Because for me, I knew Tuxie was playing, but that dog is... Who knows? That dog, that could have had a trigger for him. And even though that was a one-on-one where people would say like, oh, that's a play date, it still to me did not benefit. If anything, it actually made a fear for Tucker where he's now weary of male dogs. And Bailey's just, she's a fearful dog as it is. So I would never bring her to, she's never been to like a dog park. She's too nervy. Like it would be very uncomfortable for her and it wouldn't be doing her any good basically.
Yes, totally agree. As you said, dogs are on a spectrum of sociability. Dog parks are very, very risky, and they're really only appropriate for a small portion of dogs. If you, not to like plug my own page or whatever, but like if you go look back on my JW dog training page, there a couple weeks ago I did a few posts on dog parks that will be really helpful. I think there are a couple people that are kind of wondering like, whoa, wait a second, dog parks aren't great, because they are really good in theory. I mean, dog park, that sounds... well, doesn't sound good to me anymore. I have a negative conditioned response to it now, but to a pet parent, they think that sounds really good for their dog. So I definitely advise big caution against dog parks. Okay, so we'll just quickly run through the few more steps for behavior modification.
Oh, yeah, we got off on a tangent.
No, I know, but there's so many great questions coming in.
I
So
know.
what we'll do is we'll just quickly finish our BMOD stuff, and then we'll go through and answer more of these questions because they
Perfect.
are really good.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, so we talked about management, so separating and giving both dogs their separate space, keeping everybody safe. We talked about teaching foundation cues to make sure you've got full control, as much control as possible over your dog, and making sure you're teaching those with positive reinforcement so the dogs really enjoy those cues and have no negative feelings around it. And then we talked about addressing the underlying reason, so the underlying emotion for the issue, making sure really repairing the relationship and making the dogs like seeing each other. That we do through classical conditioning, a lot of other kind of training exercises. And then I would say basically from there, you're doing really structured reintroduction sessions that are really short and really controlled. And so like we spent a lot of time with both dogs on opposite sides of the gate. We spent a lot of time with both dogs on tethers. We spent a lot of time maybe out in the open, but with like still a barrier between them. So finding very baby step ways to slowly spend more time in the same space, but having full control over what each dog is doing, how they're feeling, and what their behavior choices are. Always making sure everybody's very under threshold, relaxed, eating, responding. And it's just like, they were just, the sessions were so controlled at the beginning.
Yeah, and that would also, for me, with Eliza's muzzle, was a huge sense of security for me, and it just allowed me to drop my anxiety, because even in the very beginning stages when we started doing those very small brief interactions, which were not anything like nose to nose, I mean nothing, it was just like
so separate,
like they were sitting next to each other and they were getting positively reinforced for looking, sitting, nothing was happening. But I think in those moments it's important that like I really stayed as calm and positive as I could. Because remember we saw like some really weird, funky interactions when I started panicking, because we would think like, oh God, Eliza's staring. She really just has like a strong look.
Yeah.
It's very intense looking, but like I would panic and I would be like, oh my God. And then everybody got weird. So like trying as a human to stay calm in those situations is like, honestly, like half the puzzle.
Totally. Well, and that's like why we spent so much time, one, why we went so slowly, but why we spent so much time making sure you felt comfortable with the training and giving you those tools, so that if somebody looked at somebody the wrong way, you could just go, oh, touch, and redirect them so quickly without you thinking about it. And that's like so much of behavior modification, like especially with reactivity outside too, it's like empowering the human to know, okay, instead of thinking like, oh no, the dogs are going to get together, what am I going to do? Or like, oh, my dog's going to see another dog on a walk, what do I do? It's like, okay, the dogs are going to look at each other, I'm going to do this, this, and this, I know exactly what to do.
Your
like
structure plan, you know what's coming, you need to be prepared so that you don't, I mean, if you're an anxious person, but like for me, like something would happen, I'd be like, and I would get so nervous that like everyone was like, what's happening? And it was like the worst. So I've gotten better at that, but still.
Well, because people don't realize like how much dogs pick up on.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so like there's this horrible owner shaming like mentality in some of the dog circles, which I certainly don't agree with that. But dogs do pick up on breathing rate, tension, like body language, facial expressions, and so unfortunately like they can pick up if you're anxious, and so it is really important. That's all the more reason why we go really slow, and why we just didn't take any risks that were unnecessary. We didn't take any risks, but we certainly didn't take any unnecessary risks.
No.
And so basically from there, it's just been organically increasing the amount of time that they have together, and then also increasing the amount of freedom they have together. Because like we said, it was really structured at first. So it was like, you're on this place, you're on this place, you're doing these two behaviors, and that's all you're doing. But then we started to loosen up a little bit. Like, okay, I'm going to kind of let you guys both out from the gate, and you can make kind of your own choices. But the thing about that is they just had 5 months of getting reinforced for lying calmly on a mat or sitting calmly looking at you. And that's where the work, all that hard work that you've done builds on itself, because the dog then is so much more likely to make these wonderful, delightful, calm choices instead of like the alternative, which they would have made 5 months prior.
100%. And I think I also want to take a moment just to stop and remind at least my audience, because I'm sure yours probably knows this already, but for my audience, this is why I really disagree with the 7-day, 14-day board and train, fix your dog. It's the same as it is in my field, where, when someone tells you to do a 14-day...
Which is nutrition.
Oh, yeah, sorry, nutrition, or fitness. If someone says they have a 14-day detox for you and it's going to change your life, at what cost? And you will see, to the average eye, oh yeah, like that works. But from what mostly Juliana, obviously I only know because I learned from her, so I'm not taking credit for this, but I've learned through this process with her, where most people see those things as like, oh yeah, like that, that guy is just, that dog's so well behaved, and that's not the case. So these 5 months of constant, slow, intense things of building is what allows that very small little interaction like we had today to not be a fight. It would not have been that way if I sent Eliza off to a boot camp with an Instagram trainer who with no credentials, and it would have been a disaster. So just keep in mind if you are looking for behavior modification, obviously I'm not saying all boarding trains are like this. I'm sure there's wonderful ones, but behavior modification is not a 2-week fix at all. It is a very long process, especially when you're dealing with something dangerous. Like when we're like Eliza's motorcycle reactivity, like, yeah, it sucks. It's like, yeah, she lunges and she's like, oh, when she sees a motorcycle, but like we're talking about bites, like, and that could kill. Like Eliza could literally kill Bailey if she wanted to. So like this is not something where I'm like, okay, we're gonna fix it in 2 weeks. It's I don't even know when I'm gonna even allow them to like, I don't know, exist in the house on a normal day. Like, we're not even close to that. I'm thinking like maybe 3 years.
I'm glad you have a reasonable timeline. Thank you.
Right. It just my point of that is just don't
Yep.
expect that behavior modification is something that is going to be a rapid, quick fix. Like you're going to take your dog out, on a walk where they have a long history of reacting to whatever, and you're going to do one session and it's going to be like, oh yeah, I'm not worried about that anymore. It's not the case. So just be prepared for that if you are, embarking on this behavior modification journey.
And you bring up like such a critical point that a lack of behavior is not the goal.
Yes.
So a simply
this is so
lack of reaction is not what we're going for, because that could mean a number of things. A lack of behavior could mean that your dog is shut down, is too scared to act, is flooded, meaning they're overwhelmed. They've learned that stillness is the best thing that works, or the best thing to keep them out of trouble, and they're not really coping with their environment. They don't have more appropriate behaviors to do instead. So what we're really asking of our dogs, actually, and it feels counterintuitive, but we say, show us how you're feeling. It's actually really important that we know how you're feeling, so we don't want to suppress that with any type of punishment or correction, because
Right.
we don't want to hide it, and we need to know what we're working with. And so if there's any negative feelings or negative emotions from either dogs that drives quote unquote unwanted behavior, it's actually really important that we know that. And so that's why we really removed anything that could potentially add any stress or suppress behavior in any way. And we taught all of our behavior and did all of our modification with reinforcement, positive reinforcement, with a lot of careful classical conditioning strategies, and we
Which
really
also takes a long time.
Right.
Classical conditioning is not
Yes.
something that's immediate where you just do it one time and then they think, oh, I see a motorcycle and now I'm getting treat. Absolutely not.
Right.
No.
So it's really, and like, I guess that is an important thing, that a big theme here too, is that it really does take time. And I absolutely have to give you a shout out, because you're like dream client. Like, all trainers know this. Like, there are clients who will put in the work and who will turn themselves into trainers and who will do literally anything you say and do the homework between and do consistent sessions. And like, thank the goodness you are one of those clients, because it really led to your progress. And it's really the only reason that this was made possible. And unfortunately, well, like, obviously, as you know, it's like a huge financial commitment. It is a huge time commitment. You really causes changing your own behavior.
Girl.
Which, like, now
That's putting it lightly.
which, like, now I'm like, oh man, we're being such like buzzkills, but it really is.
But they need to, I think it's important to
Right.
know that, because
it
it's
is
getting into this side of things with behavior modification specifically. I have learned that the industry of dog training is an absolute nightmare. No offense. I mean, what's out there for certified people and for people who are genuinely passionate, caring, understanding, and wanting the dog's behavior to change, but in a sense of they want the dog to feel better about the situation instead of suppressing the dog's behavior, period. It's like a needle in a haystack. Like, it's really true. And like, I know, like you're saying, I did the work, but like, it took me a lot of trainers to realize this, and a lot of mistakes and a lot of things that I feel very guilty. Exactly. Just like the fitness industry. Very true. We talked about this. There's a lot of comparisons between those two, but like, if you are someone looking for this kind of help, that is another journey in itself.
Yeah.
Because there's so much misinformation, and there's so many things on there's so much on TikTok. Is like my arch nemesis.
I was like, what do they look like?
Yeah. He's got what's hanging from his nose.
Hi, Tucker. It's so important that they make a cameo.
Of course.
I'm glad you guys can see them, because I was like all in the discussion. I was like, yeah.
And they're like,
Thanks for telling us.
he's got a string hanging from his nose.
Yes, important.
But anyway, yeah, I think it's important to also understand the importance of like the team together, because like, yeah, I put in the work, but if I didn't have the tools and I didn't have Juliana's support, and I mean, we literally are every single week we are on Zoom.
Yeah.
We talk all the time. She sees my stuff we are like very together on this goal, and it wouldn't have been possible without you. So,
And so it's like, it really is important to tell people what to expect, but I also like hate being like, oh, it's going to be so much work, but it really is going to be so much work.
Yeah.
And anyone who deals with like human issues, so like, I know you deal with anxiety, I deal with anxiety, like any type of any mental health, anything, like, it's never fixed. Like, it's just constantly trying to make it better and more livable and everyone happier and improve quality of life. So it really is, it's a lot, but it is worth it. Okay, so let's scroll through
Yeah.
and just cover some of the relevant questions. I think we're getting some all across the board questions.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be fun to go through some. Do you remember any off the top of your head?
One of the girls said she had a husky that reacts at skateboards, but then if she tries to intervene, it bites at her.
Ooh, redirection, yikes. Right, and so that's where that's where the question of threshold comes into play, where if your dog is already reacting, we're too close and there's no opportunity for learning because it's
so important to mention that.
Right, and because what's really important to understand is your brain has a fight, flight, or freeze mode that it switches to when there's a perceived threat. And when your dog is reacting, barking, lunging, growling, biting, whatever, they are in that scared fight or flight mode for the most part. At the very least, they're certainly not able to think. And so to expect your dog to make better choices or think or respond to you in those moments, unfortunately, is not super reasonable. And a lot of you have seen, it's just not going to happen. So at that point, you need to increase your distance or you need to rethink your training to think about how you can intervene before they fly off the handle, because that's really where the sweet spot is.
100%. And I think this is also why people like to trash talk on positive reinforcement training, because they're always like, oh, you're just putting food in their face when there's a reaction. It's like, no, that's actually not what you want to do. You want to work with the trigger before that happens. So you're creating the positive association. And what really was a switch moment for me was like, yeah, that really doesn't make any sense. Why would you add more pressure, more anxiousness, more physical strength or whatever onto an incident where she is already upset? That doesn't make sense. So like once you actually break that down and like think about it and you learn what thresholds are, that's really what it comes down to. You just have to actually understand why the dog is doing that.
Right. And so like we ran into an issue though yesterday when we were working, unfortunately, around Eliza's motorcycle stuff. There are times when thresholds are just out the window. Like they're so far. We were literally in like 2 parking lots over. And so at that point, if you feel like your dog's threshold is so crazy, I would definitely recommend at that point getting in with a veterinary behaviorist, because you might need some other type of intervention that a vet behaviorist can help with. Because if you don't feel like you have a threshold at all, that's really hard to manage. Or like if you live in a city where there's no way to get distance because their dogs are all over the place, there are some options, but it can definitely be challenging. And so threshold being the number one thing, you have to sometimes get creative about it.
Like the motorcycle sounds, we started with motorcycle sounds on the computer. That was something that we had to do for Liza's motorcycle reactivity, because the second that she hears a sound, like I was mentioning earlier, her threshold is just like whoop, like she just crosses right over. So like we have to start really, really small with those types of things. Whereas like Bailey has a much larger threshold when it comes to that kind of stuff. And we even had a situation on our walk yesterday where like a dog literally came out of nowhere where we were walking her, and we were just like, okay, and we just ran the other way, and like we created that distance immediately. So like you just have to know where that threshold is so that you can back yourself away from it or avert in another way.
Totally. Okay, I got a question about how to introduce your dog to another dog. So I'll just briefly speak on this, and this is again general terms. Remember, your individual dogs, you might consider working with a trainer to get individual help. But in general, some really great options for introducing 2 dogs is to go on what's called a parallel walk, where you walk both dogs outside on neutral territory for a walk, and you start them as far apart as they need to be, and then slowly over time get them closer together. And that keeps them moving, so that avoids any type of freezing or tension, and it can get them used to each other without a big build-up nose-to-nose interaction, and then letting them meet each other on a neutral space again, open like a yard or something like that can be much better than inside the house.
Super submissive with other dogs and is very fearful if they come near her, but she wants to play with them when they're further away.
Okay, so the question was, my dog is basically really nervous when dogs come up to her, but she wants to play if they're far away. So in general, fear can be a fluid emotion, meaning like a dog one moment might be comfortable and then the next moment might be a little nervous and then the next moment want to play. And that unfortunately makes your job a little bit harder, but it's really tough to give kind of advice on that specific, I can't unfortunately give advice about that specific situation, but I would just say, watch your dog's body language, watch for fear, look for tucked tail, ears back, cowering, lip licking, those are all stress signals. And then look for when they're more comfortable and see where, meaning tail up, eating food, ears forward, and how can you get that comfortable body language more frequently and see what environment creates that better.
That's a good question. When you're saying threshold, are you solely talking about aggression or excitement as well, aka wanting to play?
This is a great question, and a threshold it can mean anything for like kind of an overreaction. So it doesn't have to necessarily be fear. It can absolutely be your dog is barking or whining or even just ignoring you around distractions. It can really be any time your dog switches from learning and engaged and thinking and being able to eat to checking out and not being able to think and learn.
Basically, what I view it as for my dogs, because each is different when they are over threshold, Bailey will freeze and won't take food, and her over threshold looks like fear, because her natural reaction for being over threshold is not to initially like attack, whereas Eliza's it is, unfortunately, at least in the scenarios that we've experienced. So it's kind of not like a one size fits all, and each dog's over threshold might be something different. But for me, what I like to look at it is a complete deviation from normal behavior, if that would be a good way to classify it. I guess
I think that's great. And I think like some less common ways of thinking about threshold too is like yesterday when we went to the motorcycles, even when there weren't motorcycles around and they weren't, and Eliza wasn't like lunging around them, she wasn't eating, she wasn't responding to easy cues. So to me that was over threshold. And so you're absolutely right. If she's deviating from her normal, like, hey mom, what are we doing together today? Like
what we saw in Home Depot.
Yeah.
Like we took her into Home Depot and she's like, cool, what are we doing? Whereas like the second she got out and heard the motorcycles, it was like pump the brakes, like whoa, what are we doing
Low
here?
tail, not eating, head on a swivel, mouth tightly shut, and then later panting. So a lot of body language indicating she was uncomfortable. Okay, really quickly, I'll do this one. What to do if an off-leash dog starts running towards your reactive little dog? So for small dogs, I will pick up because I think that's the safest thing and the quickest thing to do to get them out of there. But be really careful about letting legs dangle and stuff like that. In general, for off-leash dogs, if you're worried about that or if they're really bad in your area, you can use what's called spray shield. So that's citronella spray. That's really like your top of the line defense if a dog runs up to you. People will also, you can do a treat scatter where if you have treats on you, you literally throw them at the off-leash dog's face. Some people recommend bringing umbrellas and literally opening them in the other dog's face. So there are some ways that you can deter other dogs and keep your dog safe, because that's most important. All right, I'm going to we're gonna hopefully save these and put this up. Okay, let me see. Sorry, we're just looking. The Reactive Dog Blog, amazing Instagram. Go follow them. They're in our comments. Oh my goodness, he wanted to come. Said, and this isn't a question, but important to note, know that with reactivity, reactions are going to happen from time to time, no matter your effort. The journey absolutely is not linear, which you know as well. Oh, you're going to come all the way up. Whoa. Oh no. Okay, well, we're really... Whoa.
He wanted you.
Hi, sweet boy. All right, I'm just looking for more questions.
I'm here to answer the question.
Woo. Hi. Oh, he's sniffing. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go to yours and looking for your questions. Oh, hey. Hi. Okay, we talked about dogs off leash. Okay, asking about inside reactivity. So like if your dog barks through the window. So management is one of the best options for this. So like window film or closing the blinds, that's really the easiest thing. And then doing some counter conditioning through the window. So rewarding your dog when they watch calmly, or having the presence of the scary thing, predict good things, treats, praise, stuff like that. Or teaching incompatible behavior when they start barking, so calling them away from the window and rewarding them for coming away.
Sorry, Bailey was lying. She wanted to be included.
What would we recommend for human aggression? Work with a trainer, a certified trainer. That's it's hard to. That's a high risk.
Oh, that's really good. Can you do
Scenario.
that one for people? Because that was how I found you. What are some certifications that you would recommend for trainers?
Okay, so how did you get connected? Recommended for finding certified experts. So I feel it's really hard. It's like the wild, wild west out there. It's like Alphabet City. But the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers, CCPDT, the International Association of the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, IAABC. Those are two really good places to start. There are also other training schools, like I went through the Karen Pryor Academy, that's really good. The Victoria Stilwell Academy is really good, the Academy for Dog Trainers. So those academies are really hard to navigate, like what academies are good and what aren't, which ones aren't based in science or don't require continuing education. And so I would really recommend starting with the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers and the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, but from there they will also guide you to how to find a good trainer and that type of thing.
And vet behaviorist, because
Yes.
I worked with one as well alongside Julie. I didn't need continuing because she was there for basically medication purposes and just to be an extra, I don't know, set of eyes really. But that's another good thing as well, vet behaviorist, because they can also help guide you to people who are certified as well.
Spencer wrote the organizations in the comments. Thank you, Spencer.
Lovely.
Okay.
A lot of the questions that are asking about your specific dog being reactive to specific things.
Right.
Just literally take everything that we just said about counter conditioning, working under threshold, and apply it to that, because it is the basis of any reactivity and or behavior modification. Whatever that dog is feeling for that specific thing, you have to address that first and work underneath that in order to build that up, and it will take time. All of those questions that are asking about my dog is reactive for this, that's literally the answer.
Totally.
Generally speaking.
And so it really is the same sequence. You manage, so you avoid big explosions. You teach foundation behaviors, checking in, name response, walking nicely on leash, to basic targeting behaviors. And just general attention to you, I think is the most important foundation behavior. And then yes, changing feelings towards the triggers. And that's where the good news is that if you're using positive reinforcement, you can change feelings towards triggers if you associate the cues they like with triggers. And it's a little bit more complicated, which is why working with a trainer is really important. But the bottom line is you have to make your dog feel more comfortable with what they're reacting to. Okay. Maybe you can answer this one. Tips for managing your own human anxiety around a potentially stressful situation for an anxious pup before they've actually reached threshold. We're mid-training and it's hard to tell, and I get nervous.
This is honestly so difficult, especially if you are an anxious person, because you know what the potential negative outcome could be. So for me, this is honestly why I like to film a lot of these things. And I would, if you are able to, obviously safely, I would really recommend filming these interactions while you're on walks if possible. I literally considered buying one of those chest straps for my iPhone to record the entire walk, because sometimes I have thought that I saw something and it's really not the case. So it's helpful to look back on the footage that you have, and we've done this numerous times.
So many
we're
times.
sitting there analyzing it frame by frame.
The footage.
But that anxiety can be helpful because you don't have that voice in your head telling you with no data that was probably bad. Well, okay, let's look at these things. I saw Kayla said phone in the fanny pack works like a charm. So I don't have one with a zipper. So unfortunately, when I've done that and I've jogged, the phone goes flying out of the fanny pack. So make sure if you're doing that, you have it secured. But also really trying to work on your calmness with their calmness together, because once you do that over and over and over, you're more likely to feel more confident when you do approach those situations that are kind of scary. And so for me, something that helps me is literally straight up sprinting and making it fun, but in the opposite direction. So my head is on a freaking swivel when I'm on a walk, and I'm usually able to spot something before they do because they're in the ground. And if I see something that I know, I'm like, whoa, fun game over there. And I just start running, and they think it's so cool. And the more that you do that, I just feel you get comfortable with doing it, and you'll learn what you are okay with and what you're not okay with.
And it becomes muscle memory, exactly like you said. You don't have to panic when you come across a trigger because you're like, what am I going to do? Like, you know exactly what you're going to do.
Having the abort mission plan, I think, is probably my favorite thing I've ever done, because I used to, had I had an abort mission plan before, I may have been able to avoid the second fight. That happened because I didn't have a plan, and I was cornered and didn't know what to do. And then unfortunately that happened. So, and
you brought up something else that I can't remember. What did you say at the beginning of that was important?
About having a camera to review footage?
Yes, thank you.
Oh.
So like we literally did that today where that interaction happened, and I was like, no, but we went back and we looked at body language, and I was like, I think it was fine, because you can only pick up so much in the moment.
And it's very hard to do that because you are panicked, so it actually like reduces your ability to like truly focus on what's happening, especially if you have two dogs, because how can you focus on both body language at the exact same time? It's like impossible.
Okay, so we had an interesting question that I don't think I can answer directly, but it's a concept that will be important. So somebody's been working on a desensitization and a go say hi protocol with their frustrated friendly greeter, but sometimes in the middle of a nice sitting greeting with another human, she seems to go over and will jump. So when it comes to your dog being unsuccessful, what I urge you to do is like think about what you can do with the equation to break it down in a way that they can be more successful. So like this was really interesting. I remember a couple months ago we were having this issue where Eliza like was like basically humping you and jumping all over you when you were working out, and I was like, we have to break it down more, and you were like, but how do I do that? Like if I do that, then I'm going to be like lying on the ground or like whatever you said. And I was like, yeah, like you have to find a place where the dog can be successful and go from there. And of course you might like, there are going to be mess ups sometimes, but then you look back. And you also brought up a really good point of data. So data is critical because one, gives you an information about it if you're headed in the right direction. Two, it can tell you holes in your training. And three, it can put your nerves at ease. And
100%. I have a legit, on my notes on my phone, a day-to-day diary of their freaking poop schedule, their interaction, did anyone have a stomach ache? I mean, I'm psychotic, so maybe like don't go that crazy, but like, speaking of data, that is very important, so you can reference, okay, we had a week where Eliza had a motorcycle reaction, she had this, she had that, because when we reached a day, which we have seen, we got to our training session on Thursday, and I'm like, okay, well, we had this, and this happened, so this is why they're probably acting that way.
Yeah.
So if you don't do that, I really would agree there and say to start taking data so you know, and to kind of go off of what you were just saying, what that might look like. So Eliza started pumping me when I was on the floor, like doing any type of floor movement for some reason. So what we started doing was have her go in on her place, and then I would get down on the floor and get right back up and reward her. Get down on the floor for 2 seconds, get back up. And so then what would happen was if I did a jumping jack, she got too excited and she got off the place. So now we know, okay, we're at this place now where we have to work just on the floor and keep reinforcing before we go to the next step. And that entire concept is like behavior modification in a nutshell.
Totally.
You have to work under
Break
before
it
you
down.
before you can go to the next step, or otherwise they're not going to be successful. And if you're constantly setting your dog up for failure, that's frustrating for you as the parent, but it's also very frustrating for the dog because they don't understand. They're like, I'm just doing what I always do. What do you mean?
Oh my God, that's such a good point. And that is like so important to note, is that so much of our dogs like misbehavior. Well, one, a lot of the times it comes from an emotional place that they can't control, or they just don't have any guidance about what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And that's where like that high rate of reinforcement and being very clear about, yes, this works, and managing the environment so they have almost no choice but to be successful. So like we had talked about in that situation, okay, well maybe you have to tether her so that she has no choice but to lie nicely on her place, and she can't practice that unwanted behavior, which goes a little bit more into like, I mean, we've talked a lot about like feelings training, and then there's like quote unquote obedience or like operant conditioning and like teaching behaviors, and anytime there's a behavior you don't like, you have to figure out a way to manage the environment so the dog is less likely to practice it.
And this is something with, for example, Bailey, typical lab, she loves counter surf. It's one of the things that I always dealt with. And how do you set her up for success? Well, number one, you don't leave anything on the counter that they can get to. That's a no-brainer. But I also provided her with, like, she really, and most dogs do, benefit from the snuffle mats. That's how I began starting that, because she wants to find things, and she's also a fatty, so you hide some food in there, and she's like, oh, and ever since I introduced, I mean, obviously all the training, but like the snuffle in particular, she does not counter surf at all anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, at all. And
because I was like, I haven't heard of that.
No, it's been since before you.
Yeah.
And so.
That's so cool.
Oh, dude, one time she ate a whole box of donuts and I came home and there was powder on her suit. You remember that?
Well, and so, okay, in the last couple minutes, I want
hurry
to
up,
definitely bring up enrichment, and that is, and I like kicking myself that we didn't talk about this earlier,
duh.
because in behavior modification, that is so critical. So obviously, the challenging moments are what you're going to want to focus your training on, but you have to look at your dog's day-to-day 24/7. What are their stress levels like, and what is their ability to display natural behaviors? How much physical and mental exercise are they getting? Are they getting a lot of outlets for sniffing and playing and chewing and licking? Because that is critical. You will not, I will go out so far as to say, like, you probably wouldn't really see progress. Anecdotally, I will say you wouldn't see progress if your dog is in a deficit with enrichment and stress relieving and natural behaviors at home.
Because a lot of times what I've seen with other people's dogs, just like people's dogs that I know, a lot of their misbehavior comes straight from boredom.
Right.
Like they're destructive behaviors that people are like, my dog is so bad. And I want to be like, no, he's not bad. He's bored.
He's being a dog. Right.
Yeah, he's being a dog. Like that's why we want to do licky mats and snuffle mats and all these things. And you will be so surprised at how much more stimulating that is for the dog than, what people think with the dog parks. And
Totally.
I would go out on a limb to even say for some dogs, the dog park is more stressful. They would be much more content sitting at home doing a frozen licky mat. You know what I mean?
Well, and same thing, honestly, with walks for some dogs, too.
Yes. Yeah. Not all dogs need to go on walks.
Right.
And that's another huge misconception. If your dog is struggling with leash reactivity, stranger reactivity, it can be a very, very stressful and overwhelming situation.
And I left my brain.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
No.
When you have a brain fart. Oh.
It's
About
not coming
walks?
back.
Oh, okay.
Well, it was going to be like about enrichment and
About boredom, maybe? Destructive?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
Got it.
right. So just with enrichment in general, what we forget is like that a lot of times reactivity or any type of aggression or anxiety, fear, like that's so stressful for our dogs, and we really have to balance that out with stress relieving activities. And that's where decompression walks, enrichment, Kongs, all of that stuff, even just like fun basic training at home, all of that can really counteract. There's a really great visual from Sarah Owings about a dog's emotional cup, and there's a lot of stuff that drains a dog's emotional cup, but there's a lot of stuff that fills it back up. So it's really important to keep that in mind.
So we're going to get kicked off. It's going to kick us off because it's been an hour, but thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, guys. Oh my gosh,
yeah,
it was
it was so awesome. I hope
I'll see you next week.
Yeah, the Landers and Julie show. We're going to save this. I know it's long, but it might be worth like listening to as like a podcast. But obviously, Julie, where to find her. So go follow her because she's fantastic and wonderful and we love her.
Simply Snooters and JW Dog Training.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for joining us.
Bye. Bye.
What?
How do I do it?
We're done. What's happening here? What's happening?